Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, in the beginning, we had the Call of Cthulhu RPG from Chaosium and Sandy Peterson. The Call of Cthulhu RPG made the successful transition to a board game with the first edition of Arkham Horror, a board game for monster hunters from Richard Launius, Lynn Willis, and Charlie Crank. Then Chaosium passed the torch onto Fantasy Flight Games, and we have Arkham Horror 2nd Edition board game from Richard Launius and Kevin Wilson. And then, after many great games, the torch is being passed to Edge Studios, and now we are back to an RPG with the new Arkham Horror role-playing game. And this is the new starter set, The Hungering Abyss. And this was provided to the Dungeon Dive as a review copy. So almost all of the games that we cover here on the Dungeon Dive are from the solo perspective, or at least the co-op perspective. That's just the way that I play almost all of my games. And so I know people will be coming to this review looking to see if the Arkham Horror role-playing game is good for the soloist. And I can't beat around the bush. I do not recommend this game for solo play. If you're looking for a solo horror RPG, there are simply better options out there. And we will actually be looking at a ton of those very, very soon, probably in the next couple of weeks, with my guide to solo analog horror. And that'll be coming out, and we'll be looking at about 10 or 12 different games for solo horror games. So Arkham Horror, the role-playing game from Edge Studios, is really a boxed mystery game with player-focused puzzles focusing on an investigation with definitive answers. I've spent the last 5 or so days with the game, contemplating the ability to play solo, wondering if there was a way, and wondering if it was worth the effort. Not in terms of it being a bad game and not wanting to put in the effort, but just, if I want something solo, there are better games to turn to. Now, I'm sure that somebody will come up with something to play this game solo. People always do. And of course, it's doable because all games can be played solo as long as you just play them by yourself. But for me, there are simply better alternatives. And hey, you know what? That's totally okay. Not all games need to be solo or co-op. So let's approach this for what it is. I was supposed to play a session last weekend, but the couple that we were going to play with, they ended up with a family emergency, and so we couldn't play. So this look is based on my preliminary thoughts of the system and the boxed starter set. We'll take a look at everything you get. I'll talk about the system and then kind of talk about my thoughts on the system and my final thoughts of reading through the scenario, reading through the Hungering Abyss, the module that comes with the starter set. Let's take a look at the back of the box here. So Arkham Horror, the role-playing game, Hungering Abyss. A chorus of howls, a ravenous hunger, and the endless abyss. Death has come to the cobbled streets of Arkham, Massachusetts. Each day, more missing posters are added to the growing pile, and another cluster of graves are left defiled and robbed. The police seem baffled, or perhaps complacent, and the fate of the city rests in the hands of those who would risk themselves to uncover the truth of the Hungering Abyss. In this beginner-friendly learn-as-you-play starter set, players take on the roles of talented and bold investigators caught up in the mystery behind the lurking dread that has fallen over the city of Arkham in the height of the 1920s. The investigators must do what they can to stop whatever force is feasting on the fear of the city. And they must do it before the true horror can be summoned from the world beyond their own. So as far as starter sets go, I think this is a little bit of a mixed bag. However, it does have me excited for the full version when that is released, but I am a little apprehensive. But let's start with the positives. And one of the positives is all of the cool stuff you get in this game for the price. I think it's retailing for $35. So even if you got a group of people together to play one GM and 3 to 4 friends, and you all chipped in $8 or something, you could have a few sessions of really fun time playing this game, and you would never need to buy anything else again. You could think of it as a closed box game. But in this slim box, you will get a few characters, starter characters. We will get William Yorick, Daisy Walker, Rita Young, Carolyn Fern, and Joe Diamond. And as I'm sure you saw with Rita Young here, some of the characters do come with some tangible evidence that you will need to look at and read and investigate. So there are some things in here for the players to interact with, some codes and things that need to be solved by looking at this cipher and then determining what this says. We will have some other pieces of evidence like this medical report, or perhaps these cards here that are little pieces of paper from the Arkham Police Department from tickets that a certain officer has written. So there are things for the players to interact with. There are pieces of evidence. There are pamphlets and props for the GM to pass out to the players. We also get our rulebook / scenario book, and this is a learn as you play. I'm not huge into that idea, especially with an RPG. And I think this leads me to one of my negatives is the rules are scattered about through the scenarios, through the different acts, throughout the different scenes. And so it makes it very difficult to find where a rule is if you need to go back and remind yourself. I am not a fan of this type of thing in an RPG at all. There's no index. There's not even really a table of contents. And so it does mean that if you're looking for one certain rule, you will have to stop and really turn through every single page until you find the thing that you're looking for. So it's kind of while they tried to make it easier to learn, I think it kind of backfired and it actually made it a little more difficult to learn. You also get a GM screen that has a couple handy tables, basically a table for your trauma and a table for your injury. I do think there is one error here, though, on the trauma table on how you're supposed to add. This says that you're supposed to roll a d6 and add 1 for each existing injury, but that's not right. That's for the injury table. This should be that you're supposed to add 1 for each one you roll on the horror dice. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. But I did want to point that out. There is just that little error there. But you'll get a list of all of your actions, your simple actions, and your complex actions. So this is just a nice way, just a nice little cheat sheet. You will also get some large cards for your NPCs and your enemies. So our allies here, we have Lita Chantler, we have Agnes Baker, and then we have some of our enemies here. We have the Umidorf tentacles. So we have a few of those that you can encounter. We have Naragoth, the Charnel Lord. We have the Ghoul Priest. We have Bob the Ghoul. Billy Cooper, the Cultist. We have the Ghoulish Cultist. We have a few of those. The Ravenous Ghoul, a couple of those. And we also have another cultist in Peter Warren. You will also get some recognizable tokens to keep track of your physical injuries and your mental injuries there. We'll get 2 stacks of dice. And so we have these gray dice, and those are used for the player dice for your pools, for your pool of dice. We'll talk about the system in just a moment. We get some green dice, and these are for horror dice. And when you take horror damage, you will add horror dice to your dice pool when you roll. And if you roll 1s on those, then that's when you start taking mental trauma. We will also get a small deck of cards of items and spells, and these are things that the players can find, such as Ward of Protection, Blinding Light, an Antique Lamp, an Improvised Blunt Weapon, Peter Warren's Dagger, a Flamethrower, a Bowie Knife, a Stick of Dynamite, a Molotov Cocktail, Cultist Robes, a Kerosene Lamp, and a Pulsing Amulet. So we'll get some physical components there to keep track of some items. We'll have a few other little tokens that you can keep track of ammunition and just things that you might need to keep track of on your character, and also damage for the enemies there. And this game also does have player-focused puzzles, and those are in the shape here of these sliding puzzles. Now, longtime viewers of the Dungeon Dive will know that I am not a fan of player-focused puzzles when it comes to RPGs. And I have a long video about why. I can post a link to that maybe above here. But that's because I like my characters to be the ones solving puzzles, not my players. And I don't think that my intelligence as a human sitting at the table should not be tested because I'm not the one on the adventure. Rita Young is the one on the adventure, so it is her intelligence that should be tested. And so, yeah, just not a huge fan of player-focused puzzles, but this game does come with two, and they are both sliding puzzles, very similar to the kind of sliding puzzles that you might see in Mansions of Madness Second Edition. And as a matter of fact, in a very kind of weird way, this game reminds me of playing a scenario of Mansions of Madness Second Edition, but substitute the app for a human GM. It's kind of funny how that circle is complete now. Mom 2E, we had the app was a substitute for the game master, and now we're back to the other side there. And then you will also get some tokens for your characters there. So here we have all of our tokens for our different heroes. We will have some tokens for some of our monsters and some tokens for some of our cultists and maybe some tokens for some various NPCs. We have these generic tokens here, and those are recognizable from Mansions of Madness Second Edition, same type of tokens there. And also some more tokens for our monsters. And so these are all used on the map boards because when you go into combat and when you go into more structured turns, the game does kind of feel like a board game. And so you will have 3 double-sided maps. So here we have the map of the graveyard for the scenario when you are in the graveyard. We have St. Mary's Hospital there. We have, I believe this one here is Joe Diamond's house. Let's see here. Yeah, Joe Diamond's house. So, hey, we finally get to see where Joe Diamond lives. How cool is that? So his house looks pretty nice. I didn't imagine him having such a nice house. Here we have Peter Warren's house there. And then this map is really cool. I like this map quite a bit. We have this this Arkham Woods, so when you're outdoors, and then we have this really cool kind of ritual chamber here, the ritual site. And man, that's a really cool battle map. I could see actually just using this to play some games of Forbidden Psalm or something on there. But yeah, so that's kind of all of the physical components. So you get quite a bit. You get a lot of stuff in this slim box for $35. Another positive, I think, is the core mechanism, the D6 dice pool system. They call it the DPS system, and that is the dynamic pool system, where your pool of dice are spent to do actions, and your dice also represent your health. It's a cool system. So if we take a look at one of our character sheets here, on the back we'll have our story so far, very similar to what is going on with the Arkham Files games. And then it'll have a little preview of some of the evidence that that investigator is bringing to the party. And on the inside of our character sheets here, we will have all of our skills: agility, athletics, wits, presence, intuition, knowledge, resolve, melee, ranged, and lore. And there are 2 different types of actions you can take: simple actions and complex actions. And those are all outlined on this quick reference side. So simple actions are actions that are hard to fail. They usually cost only 1 die to perform. And so when a character is in tip-top shape, they will have 6 dice in their dice pool, 6d6, and you can put them on your character sheet like that. As they take wounds, they will have to cover up one of your dice pool spots with a wound token, and that limits how many dice get added back to their dice pool on a new turn. You also might have to put in some of these mental injuries, these mental afflictions here. You'll place one of those on your character sheet. When you do that, and you want to spend a couple dice to do something, you will also have to add a horror die to your dice pool. And if that horror die rolls a 1, then you have to roll up on one of your trauma tables. And so that's how you take trauma. That's how you take mental trauma. Now, at the beginning of your turn, you have the opportunity to completely heal yourself. You can take off all of your injuries. And if you completely heal yourself, you start with your full pool of dice, but you take an injury. And as you take more injuries, you will have to add more to your result on this 1d6 table here. And if you ever roll an 11 or higher, that's when your character dies. And injuries can be healed by taking prolonged rests in unstructured turns. So we have 2 different types of turns. We have unstructured and structured. Unstructured turns are usually social interactions or investigating. You're looking around a house for a hidden object. You're conversing with NPCs trying to figure things out. And when you do that, it's more of a relaxed style of play. When you go to the structured turns, that's usually when you are on one of these battle maps, and that's when the game becomes more like a board game where you are taking turns doing actions and reactions. And so if you were in an unstructured turn and maybe you wanted to read one of these books in order to figure out something about the Cthulhu mythos, something about the Cthulhu cycle deities, Rita Young's not very good at that. She has a lore of 6, so I might want to spend 3 dice to try to get a 6 or higher. And no, okay, so no 6 or higher. So those 3 dice would be spent, and then I could try that again on my next turn to try to get a 6 or higher. No. We also have a thing called insight, and insight is a currency that players can spend to add dice and to mitigate some of the bad luck. In an unstructured turn, when you have used up all of your dice, the other players can use up their dice, and then you will start a new round, and you will get all of your dice back. And that's kind of how a structured turn works as well, but there are more complex actions to take in a structured turn, such as aiding another investigator, disengaging from melee combat, healing your horror damage, healing wounds, reloading under pressure, and doing melee attacks or ranged attacks. And attacks work the exact same way. For a melee attack here, Rita Young is pretty good at melee, so she has a 4 or higher. So if I wanted to attack Peter Warren here, I could say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 dice and make a melee attack of a 4 or higher. I hit. I would do damage based on the equipment that I had. And then Peter Warren, his dice pool would also get filled up with injuries. Dice pools, the dice remaining in your pools, is always public knowledge, even on the NPCs, even on the enemies. So the players always know where all of the combatants stand from one moment to the next. You know, longtime viewers of the Dungeon Dive will know that I am a huge, huge fan of D6 dice pool systems. It's just so easy to conceptualize. If I need to roll a 5 or higher, that is harder to do on 1d6 than it is on 3. You just have more chances, and it's easy to see. And because the players can constantly see how many dice other players have, how many dice the monsters have, how many dice the NPCs have, it's really easy to keep in mind, to keep track of all of the action on the table. So each of the characters will also have some knacks. And such Rita Young is a track star. So the first time that she spends a die to move each turn, she can move an additional 10 feet. So she's better at movement because she's fast. She's also a skilled fighter. When you perform a complex action to attack an engaged target and you score 3 or more successes, that target cannot use a reaction to block the attack. So characters, not only can you spend actions to do things on your turn, but you can also spend dice to react to things when it is another player's turn, or when it is a monster's turn, or a cultist's turn, or an NPC's turn. And so your dice in your dice pool really can be spent at just about any time to do actions or reactions. Overall, I think the system is pretty cool. The equipment is pretty simple here, such as Rita's baseball bat, engaged. So she has to be engaged to use it, meaning in melee combat. And it's 2 damage and it does 2 hands. But if you roll a 1 on an attack, your baseball bat might be damaged. And that's when you might take one of these damage tokens and put that on your character sheet there. And if both are ever filled up, then your bat breaks and you might have to find another improvised weapon. But each of the characters will have different knacks and different things. Some characters will have spells, and spells you have to do lore tests in order to cast your spells. So here we have William Yorick is an encore performance and a preparation and poise. He comes with his gravedigger's shovel, a heavy leather jacket. He can punch and kick. He has a kerosene, a lantern, and some other equipment. So one thing you don't get in this starter set is any kind of rules for character creation. This starter set is completely 100% focused on these pre-generated characters. And for me, that's a huge bummer. I frame almost all of my RPG thoughts around character creation. For me, it's the best way for the players to learn the game. It's the best way for me to learn a game. And it's the best way for me to teach a game as you step through each of the character sheet, all of the different sections, and you can teach each section as you get to it. That makes a lot of sense to me. I know there are a few starter sets that completely forego character creation in lieu of presenting pre-gens, and I do think this is a bad way to present the game because it forces a lot of knowledge on the player all at once. More recently, we also had the Walking Dead starter set that approached the game like that. I think that also limits how useful the starter set is with after your initial plays because you can't really do anything else with it. I think if we take a look at better examples in the latest Call of Cthulhu RPG, the latest starter set, and the D&D Essentials set is great because it does, both of those do focus on character creation and they allow you to play really a full game, just kind of a reductive version, a stripped down version of that game. This starter set feels more like it's focused only on the things that come in this game or in this box. And I don't think you'll be able to use a lot of this stuff later on down the road, but I am not exactly sure. But when it comes to character creation, I'm curious about how that's going to happen. I have a feeling that you will just be able to assign a certain spread of numbers to your skills. And then there will probably be a list of knacks that you can choose. And then maybe you'll get to spend some points or something on equipment. We do have dollars here, but it doesn't really talk about spending money. So I'm not sure what the dollars do. We have things like a fedora, but I don't know what that does. I don't know if these knacks are just created for these characters. I'm not really sure. Having all of the characters have 6d6 in their dice pool means all characters have the same amount of health. So I'm not sure how that's going to go. Another thing that you might notice is lacking is any kind of experience. And so I'm not sure how the full game is going to handle character progression. This starter set handles character progression by having the characters level up at certain key moments during the scenario. And when they do level up, they can choose one of these options. So leveling up happens twice during the adventure. The game master will indicate when you gain a level. It doesn't matter what you do. It's really completely out of the player's hands. The first time you get to choose one skill and improve it. And improving a skill means you drop down a die. So if you improved your knowledge, it would be a 5+. If you improved Joe Diamond's agility, it would become a 4+. The second time you may improve 2 skills, but they can't go down to a 3 or higher is the best they can get. Or you can gain a new ability listed below. And I have a feeling that I guess abilities are knacks. I'm not sure. There's nothing here on the character sheet about an ability. So I'm not sure if those two terms are interchangeable or not. So I am really curious about how the full game will handle not just character creation, but also character progression. And I think both of those two things are really key for me personally to get into a game. From the GM side of things, you really won't get any kind of tools or tables or anything for any kind of random elements. This really is kind of a linear adventure from the beginning to the middle and the end. Towards the middle, the players will have the option to explore a few different areas. And you do have this one table here, so they can explore St. Mary's Hospital, the police station, the graveyard, Professor Peter Warren's house, Joe Diamond's house, Velma's Diner, Ye Old Magic Shop, or the River Docks. But there are no random charts for any kind of encounters or anything like that. So you are just kind of reading through this and you are doing the thing that the scenario book tells you to do when the players encounter it. I am hoping that the full game does introduce some more random elements for the GM to roll up random mysteries, random scenarios, random encounters, and that kind of thing. I always like a lot of random elements when I am playing a GM role in a traditional RPG or if I'm going to be playing solo. And if this game is going to be soloable at all once the full game comes out, it will need those kind of random elements because coming up with a mystery on the fly is something that will be very important. Yeah, so overall, my thoughts on this starter set are a little mixed. It's a mixed bag. I can see this working really well for some, especially if you just want to buy the game, go in together with a few friends, Each of you put in about $10, and you can have a lot of fun with just this closed box game. And even though there are some things I don't like about it, I am still very curious and somewhat excited about checking out the full game when it is available. From a solo perspective, I think there's a real opportunity here for Edge Studios to do something interesting and different in this kind of investigative RPG space. I was hoping that they were going to more fully embrace the board game lineage of Arkham Horror. And what separates Arkham Horror, the Arkham Files games, from its great great grandparent with the Call of Cthulhu RPG is that they were co op and they were soloable. And when I first heard that they were making an Arkham Horror role playing game, I thought, wow, maybe they will make this a co op RPG. How awesome would that be? But they didn't. They chose to go in a different direction. Personally, I would have chosen to embrace that co-op nature of the Arkham Horror name and make this a co-op RPG. But I'm super interested to see how the full character creation and progression is handled. I'm interested in the tools that they will present the GM with for coming up with mysteries and things for the players to do. I hope they don't rely too much on these really tightly scripted scenarios and instead come up with a set of interesting tools for the GM to use to facilitate a kind of more open sandbox RPG set in the strange and wonderful city of Arkham, Massachusetts. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this brief look at, this brief review, my preliminary thoughts on the Arkham Horror role-playing game. Let me know what you think, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.